Hi everyone, I'm Ivana and I'm looking at the acoustic occurrence and behaviour of baleen whales around the subantarctic Prince Edward Islands. So for those of you who don't know, the Prince Edward Islands is a collective of two islands made up of Marion Island and the smaller Prince Edward Island. It is part of the South African territory and it's between South Africa and Antarctica. Thank you. I have a hydrophone, a SD500, located between Prince Edward Islands and Marion Island. It's on a fixed mooring and it's between the islands, between South Africa and Antarctica, because this is a corridor of migration for the baleen whale species. It's an important area for us to find out more about their conservation, their presence, and their movements, because, as we've heard previously today, the baleen whales, they spend time up in winter, mating and breeding in the lower latitudes, and then they move down for feeding in the higher latitudes. The species that I'm looking at are the humpback whales, as we've heard about today, the Antarctic blue whales, which are critically endangered, their younger cousins or smaller cousins, the Madagascan pygmy blue whales, which are data deficient, and therefore we don't have a status for them on the IUCN list, so we don't know just how endangered they are at the moment. The Antarctic minke whale, which is also my favorite one out of my study, as you'll come to find throughout this presentation. They're also data deficient and threatened. The fin whales, which we heard about, thank you, Emma, which are endangered, and the sei whales, which are also data deficient, endangered, and very rare to come across in the study, so I get quite excited when I do find them. The calls that I was looking for, so out of my 6 species, I had 8 call types that I was looking for. Up at the top there, we have the Antarctic blue whale call. That's a Z shape. That's made during mating behavior. Over here, we have the Madagascan pygmy blue whale, a beautiful harmonic 2-unit call that they produce. Then fin whales, we have social calls in the 99 hertz and in the 20 hertz. Their feeding calls or pulses happen in the 40 hertz range. Down over here, we have the blue whale D calls. These are produced by both the Antarctic blue whale and the Madagascan pygmy blue whale. That's in feeding behavior. And over here, we have the sei whale upsweep pulses or upsweep calls. They are very rare to come across. So when you do see them, like I said, I get very, very excited. And people in my lab know I jump up and down every time I find one. Down over here, we have the Antarctic minke whale. They've got this beautiful harmonics that happen after each other, very staccato-like, and I haven't included an audio, but I thought I'll do a bit of an impression for you. Outside of science, I'm also a drummer, so you'll understand now why I like them, because they sound like doof, 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 pause. Doof, 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 pause. And that repeats a few times. And then over here, we have the humpback whale song. I'm sorry it isn't more visible on the larger screen as it is on the small one, but if you want to see it more clearly, come to me afterwards or pop me a message in Wova. So I was looking at the acoustics from a Soundtrap 500 hydrophone using Raven Pro software. Here we go, that's the logo for those who haven't seen it yet. And I was also looking at sea surface temperature around the region using a level 4 austere dataset. And I analyzed these using MATLAB and Microsoft Excel. So what did I actually find? I found that during the 6 months, the first batch of the data, by the way, I am hoping to get to 3 years in total, but these are the first 6 months I'm looking at. We have from May through to October of 2022, it was actually colder in blue during those months on average than we expected based on the 41-year climatology that I did, visible in red. And what we're able to see over here is if we look down at each of the call types for the months, only 2% of all the hours in May month had the sei whales. Now you understand just why I get so excited when I see them. There are really that few calls. And no calls at any of the other months during this winter time. Then, if we move down to the ones that actually are present every single month, we see that we have the Antarctic blue whale, the fin whale, and the humpback whales calling in every one of these months during the winter time. And interestingly enough, if we have a look at the fin whale 20 and 99 hertz pulses, they're actually occurring in the high 90s. So much so that in October, we have 100% occurrence. Just to clarify, this means that every single hour of every single day during the month of October 2022, there was at least one fin whale present and making this call. Because it's a social call, we can actually up that to say that we know there is at least 2 fin whales present because they're socially interacting. On a daily scale, this is what it looks like. We're seeing my very few and very special sei whales up there on the left. What you're seeing on the line is the sea surface temperature, so you can see it's in the warmer sea surface temperature times that their calls occurred. Same applies for the Madagascan pygmy blue whale, also occurring in the warmer time. And then you see that the humpback whale prefers to be making its calls and being in the area of Prince Edward Islands around the middle of winter. We see the D calls and the Z calls from blue whales. And interestingly enough, down here, what I want to draw your attention to is the fin whale 40 hertz pulses, the feeding pulses, is quite variable. But if we have a look at the 20 and 99 hertz social pulses, they're almost constantly around the high 20s, which means 20 to 24 hours out of every 24-hour day, there is a call present. So we can stand here, sit here, enjoy talks for a whole entire day, but we only feed every few hours. So I guess the same applies for our whales over here. They're not eating the whole entire time, but they are chatting away beautifully the whole entire time. Over here in the red, I've highlighted zones or time zones where we have more than one call that has a dip or a decrease or even a gap. The reason I've highlighted them is, so far I've shown you sea surface temperature, but I am in future parts of my study looking at wind and other variables. And the reason we think that there's this decrease in calls is actually because of high wind noise masking out the whale calls. So they might be there, they might just be hidden by excessive noise in the background, and hopefully I'll be able to actually show that to you soon or at the next symposium. So how important were some of these relationships? The Madagascan pygmy blue whale we found to have a significant relationship with sea surface temperature, where it makes more calls and is more present in the Prince Edward Island region when it has a warmer sea surface temperature. We found the inverse effect with the humpback whales. They preferred the peak winter or the cooler times. If we have a look at the Z calls from the Antarctic blue whales, this is also their mating calls, to remind you. They also had higher call occurrences when we had the slightly warmer water. As you know, I only found 11 of the sei whales, so calling this statistically significant is not really something I'd do, but I would say it's very interesting to see that they only occurred in the warmer time. And moving forward with the research in the other batches, we do actually see more of them as it gets warmer. I just haven't got the plots or the stats for you yet, but hopefully next time around you'll see all of my updated stuff. Then on to some of my favorite parts of the research, which is the diel patterns, the day-night patterns. What we see over here is the upsweeps, there's the laser, sorry. The upsweep calls from the sei whales. They were only occurring in the evening times and around dusk and dawn. So out of the 11 that we saw, none of them occurred during the daytime, which I find quite interesting. And then you also have the bioduct from the mink whales, my favorite one, the doof 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 drum. They are occurring in the nighttime as well. You see a few of them occurring in the day, but predominantly around 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock in the evening. Then looking at the D calls produced by both of the blue whale species, we see that there is a bit of a varying trend. However, the peak is around 8 to 9 o'clock in the evening, which is also nighttime. And we see the humpback songs, that is very clear, that trend, that very low occurrences in the daytime and increased at night. Then on to the ones that are not as interesting or not as significant, because it's only a 1% change from the dotted line is if there's no variability. So this 1% up and 1% down is showing hardly any variability for the Madagascan pygmy blue whales in gray. The Z calls in blue, so those are the mating calls from the Antarctic blue whale. The 20 hertz, 99 hertz social pulses, they're almost right there on that line of no variability, and the 40 hertz pulses for feeding from the fin whales. So what we can tell from this is that from a behavioral point of view, there is not a big difference between their feeding and the mating behavior when it comes to time of day. So just to conclude, are there species present? Are the ones I'm looking for present throughout the winter time at Prince Edward Islands? Yes, yes they are. Are there relationships between sea surface temperature and the calls of these species? Yes, there are for some, not significantly for others, but out of my calls, there definitely are relationships present. And moving forward with the research, I'd hope to see how they evolve when you add more data in and add more variables such as sea surface height, wind, chlorophyll A, and look at the prey abundance in the region. Are there day-night patterns? Yes, we have seen there are for some of them. And will this research be continued? Most definitely. So I'd just like to thank everyone involved, my funders at the university, and everyone here who's online and in person who's listened to my talk. If you have any questions, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that super interesting talk. I'm very biased towards your humpback song data. It's really cool to see how the patterns that we see in their dial singing is the same on the coast as it is further south. So that was very cool to see. We do have time for questions. So if anybody has a question, please feel free.
Hi, thanks. It's a very cool talk. That's a great data set. Just wondering, did you have any whales that you couldn't identify? That was a problem we ran into in the off-Vima seamount with the data set we had there.
Thanks, Simon. I did come across a call which wasn't one of my 6 baleen whales that I was looking for. There was a thought that it might actually be an Amaru's whale, but we're not 100% sure. You know, there is a lot of noise during the winter time specifically, so I'm hoping that as I move through the summer months of the data, I might get more clear understanding of the other species around the area and hear them. But yeah, it is quite interesting that when you have all of this noise in the water, and I'm trying to let you guys hear the stuff, but there's just this other noise going on, so I can't even show you a nice piece, that you actually can hear the killer whales overlying most of the time. So not another baleen whale species, but another species, yeah.
No one has a question. I actually have a question. I don't think I caught it in your talk, but it looks like you had continuous data rather than duty cycle.
So I had 14 minutes out of every hour. So I was looking at each 14 minutes, went through the full 14 minutes, and that was representative of that hour. Because I was looking at presence, absence, I wasn't counting the exact number of calls, so I just looking were they present during that hour for each hour. Yeah.
Okay, seems like there's no other questions. Thank you so much for your talk.